Class is now in session. I'm Professor Hockey, and today we're discussing Game 29 of the regular season between the San Jose Sharks and the Winnipeg Jets, in which the Sharks have won 2-1. And so the Sharks have returned home after a pretty long 6-game road trip that also ended up being quite successful for this team, and also extremely exciting and interesting to watch. Over that 6-game time frame, the Sharks managed to score 26 goals for, and yet also give up 26 goals against. Here in tonight's game against the Jets, it was a drastic change of pace than what we have been used to over these past couple of weeks, because while this game was still quite competitive and quite close on the scoreboard, it was not nearly as much of a hard attack style of game, not nearly as much back and forth, and not nearly as much goal scoring. The Sharks only managing to put up 2 goals here tonight, and yet they come out on top anyway because they limited the Jets to just 1 goal. And while this might not be as hyped and excited and exciting as, like, let's say the Detroit Red Wings game a few days ago where the Sharks come back from 4 goals down, this is the type of game that the coaching staff will definitely enjoy much more so. David Quinn going to be happy with this type of 2-1 victory after that long road trip. And the Jets, they really aren't a slouch in the NHL, came into this game on a 4-game winning streak, a top team in the Central Division in that top 3, likely destined to make the playoffs this season. And what this really is going to show is that the San Jose Sharks are no slouches at this point of the season. Perhaps they were a free 2 points for any team coming in the early parts during that first dozen or so games that the Sharks played. But now these teams, even the best of the best in the NHL, do need to be careful of the trap game here against the San Jose Sharks, because while they find themselves right at the bottom of the standings, though they now have leapfrogged the Chicago Blackhawks with them losing their game tonight, this is not a team playing like a 31st in the league type of squad. They have a lot of pride in their game, and they're managing to put up these goals, to put up these performances, even from behind in a lot of these games. But let's jump into this one. The Sharks started off exceptionally well in the first period. Through the first 6 minutes, they had already put up about 11 shots on net, tons of chances, and yet not managing to score the first goal. After those 6 minutes, the Jets slowly managed to claw their way back into this game, but not before the Sharks would score the first goal here tonight, coming from Justin Bailey, his first of the year and his first as a San Jose Shark. The Jets would eventually tie it up a few minutes later with a goal from former San Jose Sharks player Brendan Dillon, and it would be a 1-1 game heading into the second period. Now, at this point during the road trip, we would expect 3 goals on either side to make it a crazy high-scoring affair, but instead the second period actually goes scoreless, and so we head into the third period tied at 1. In the previous few games, the Sharks would then fall behind in the third period and be forced to have to make the comeback. The same would not happen in the final frame of this game, however. This game would actually remain tied for the majority of the third until the last few minutes. The Sharks would get a power play for themselves, and William Eklund, with his 7th of the year, his 4th on the power play, would take the lead and get the game winner, also Eklund's 4th of the year. And while the Jets would have a late in the period power play, they'd go on that 6-on-5 situation, something the Sharks have been used to in these past few games and have had success with. The Sharks kill it off and manage to get the victory, get the 2 points in the standings in regulation. Moving on to the players to talk about, we have the top line of Eklund, Hertl, and Barabanov. Obviously, in the previous game, Eklund had missed it due to a brief injury, and so LeBanc was here. They are now been reunited, no surprises there. And starting off with Eklund, it was a very interesting game for himself. The sort of elephant in the room here is that he ends up taking 2 penalties in this one, both of them holding penalties, interestingly enough, which is something that the coaching staff may not be super happy with. But besides those 2 penalties, Eklund played exceptionally well. It was a very, very good game for Eklund. He set up multiple grade A opportunities. He had the game-winning goal in this one, probably had an opportunity for at least 1 or 2 more goals, at least a couple of assists as well. He was just generally rolling when it came to himself offensively, which was quite nice to see, and it was great to see that he did not miss a beat from the injury in the previous game against the Vegas Golden Knights. He certainly came to play and was one of the Sharks' best players on the night. When it came to his 2 linemen, teammates. Hurdle, I thought, had a much better game and performance compared to the previous one. He definitely looked more so like the Tomas Hurdle that we are used to. Doesn't actually end up with a point here tonight, but he certainly had a very high level of effort, complemented Eklund exceptionally well, used his puck protection skills as we are completely used to, and it was just generally a very solid game. When it comes to Barabanov, like I mentioned at the early parts of this game, the Sharks were exceptionally successful, and Barabanov was a reason for that, and I thought when seeing those first couple of shifts for him that he had finally arrived, this was finally going to be the game that Barabanov would break through and return to the norm that we are used to with Barabanov, but that didn't really end up shaping up, and while Barabanov continued to be okay for like the rest of the first period, it kind of slowed down from there, and he ended up still having a decent game, but like I mentioned in my previous review with the Vegas Golden Knights, is that you're not really hoping for decent for Barabanov, you're hoping for good, and he hasn't quite hit that level consistently. When it comes to the second line, we have Zetterlund, Granlund, and Duclair. Granlund does manage to keep his point streak rolling with his 16th assist of the year. He's just been absolutely everywhere in terms of point performance for the San Jose Sharks. And he had a couple of very good looks here tonight as well. Some really slick passing to Duclair at times, to other players as well. He's just an extremely crafty playmaker, which was not something we were seeing early on into the season, but I'm so happy that we are seeing it now over these last few weeks, because it was something that I was hoping for when the Sharks did acquire him in that Erik Karlsson trade. A very good game for Granlund. Generally, as a line, this wasn't necessarily as successful as the top line here. What I've really much noticed about these three players is that they're very good at getting like grade A chances, but they're not as great as sort of working it around in the offensive zone. They're more so trying to stretch out the ice, use their speed, get some rush chances, or perhaps some very quick offensive chances from like pucks behind the net being bouncing around, passes it into the slot, these types of plays. Granlund and Duclair as a duo merge very well for being able to do that. Zetterlund fits in slightly awkwardly, I would say. Zetterlund seems more so like a forechecking type of player, the type of player who would maybe succeed slightly more on the first line. Perhaps a swap of Zetterlund and Barabanov could technically happen, but I believe for now David Quinn would love to just retain these two top lines because the Sharks have been having some good offensive success, so there's likely not much of a reason to rock the boat. But if a situation does occur where a lineup change is necessary, that would probably be the first swap that I would do. Of course, we had already seen Eklund and Hurdle playing with Zetterlund, and they've had some mixed success at times, but that could be something to go for, and perhaps more so just to see how Barabanov as a more north-south player could work with both Granlund and Duclair. When it comes to the third line, we have Hoffman with Sturm and Bailey. When it comes to Mike Hoffman, he had a couple of goals in the other game against the Vegas Golden Knights, but besides those two goals, I mentioned how his even strength play wasn't necessarily all that great. Well, like with Eklund a couple of days ago, sometimes you really just need a couple of goals to really get that confidence for yourself rolling, and that was absolutely the case for Mike Hoffman, because while he doesn't actually end up contributing in this game, I actually thought he was much better here tonight compared to how he was in the previous game against Vegas. He was all over it in the offensive zone, had like two really great chances to score. One of them a very nice exchange with Nico Sturm early on into this game where he passes it, or no, he gets the pass back from Sturm after a beautiful keep-in at the blue line a few seconds earlier, and some success as well on the Sharks' second power play unit, and just generally a very good game for Mike Hoffman. When it comes to Justin Bailey, he continues to be really good like he has been in these past couple of games. There were a couple of players returning to the lineup here tonight, both William Eklund and Luke Kunin, and so there was a chance that Justin Bailey would lose his spot in the starting lineup, but it didn't end up occurring. He had done enough over these past couple of games to warrant David Quinn keeping him in the top 12 here, and he rewarded him not only with some strong play, but with that first goal. Then when it comes to Nico Sturm, he had a strong start to this game, but unfortunately he actually leaves it at some point in the third period, if I'm not mistaken. Doesn't end up playing those last few minutes. The Sharks definitely could have liked to use him defensively, but it ends up being okay as they do not give a goal up to the Jets in that final frame, and hopefully Sturm is not out too long term, because the Sharks have really started to lock down a pretty successful top 12 for themselves. Then when it comes to the fourth line, this is where things a bit fall apart, I would say. As I mentioned, Luke Cunnin does return to the lineup. He's joined by both Kevin Labanc and Philip Zadina. And this fourth line, it's kind of just three players happenstance brought together. There isn't really any chemistry here. There really isn't any cohesion here. And this fourth line definitely played like it was just three players separate from each other and not three players in any sort of harmony with each other. In any case, there was no real offensive momentum here. Individually, I thought Zadina was half decent, Labanc was half decent, Cunnin did some okay things defensively, but when put together as an actual line, they didn't really do all that much. From a defensive standpoint, we have Ferraro and Burrows once again leading the way here. We're tasked with defending a lot, especially in the third period against the Winnipeg Jets, and found themselves playing in the defensive zone a ton, but I actually thought they did a relatively admirable job. Ferraro, as we know, if there's one thing he has always had success with, even in the past couple of seasons where he has really struggled, it is with blocking shots. He is the type of player who is willing to lay it out on the line for the San Jose Sharks. It's one of the reasons why we currently are hearing so much in the trade rumor mill around the NHL of Mario Ferraro perhaps being on the trading block, and this is because he's a player who you know is going to do anything possible to get your team the victory, even if he's not necessarily that great of a player. And so I appreciated Ferraro's performance and Burrow's performance by extension here tonight. When it comes to the second pairing, we have Addison and Thrun. I will start with Henry Thrun, who's kept in the lineup for a second straight game. I do support that. I mean, I always support benching Mark-Edouard Vlasic. He's not very good, and so having Thrun play over him is a nice treat. In the previous game against Vegas, he had sort of a hit or miss kind of pro and con type of game. Here tonight, I thought it was exceptionally more muted. It was definitely not as high and low roller coaster type of performance, and was instead very much just a straight, narrow play. Of course, there were still a couple of issues. There always are going to be for any player, not even necessarily a young player in the defensive zone or anything like that. And he didn't exactly jump up offensively like we did see in that Vegas game. He kept it a lot more safe, but I thought that also kept it pretty secure, and he had an all-around decent game. Is it enough to earn him another one? I hope. As I mentioned, I do not want to see Vlasic back in the lineup, but it's certainly possible he gets sent back down or at the very least benched. When it comes to his partner here tonight, we have Calen Addison, who I was not particularly impressed with in the previous game. Addison has been extremely up and down for his entire time with the San Jose Sharks. Some games he just looks completely invisible. Other games he is a downright liability for themselves. And then there's also those few games here and there where he's just like the best defenseman for the San Jose Sharks on the night. Here it was somewhere in the middle. I thought Addison was decent, not too many egregious defensive errors in his own zone, which was nice to see. Some okay offensive plays, I guess. Found himself actually on the second power play unit for the Sharks instead of the first power play unit, as they are now going with a 5-forward like they had started the year with. And so the original reason why they had acquired Calen Addison to run that top power play is now irrelevant, considering Mikael Granlund has really taken that role onto himself and done exceptionally well with it. And so when it comes to Addison, perhaps the smaller role will work to his benefit. I thought he was decent enough in that particular situation here tonight, and generally was an okay game for him. And then when it comes to the third pairing, we have Ruda and Ohotyuk. Ruda, I was extremely happy with his performance in the previous game against the Vegas Golden Knights, but it was quite obvious that that would never really hold up. If it did, Ruda would be like a top defenseman for the San Jose Sharks. That's clearly not the case, and so he has fallen very far back down to earth here tonight with his performance. Not very good. I mean, it wasn't terrible. There weren't tons of mistakes, but in terms of yesterday, where he was winning battles, he was winning races, he was using his stick to poke pucks off the sticks of opposing players, there was just none of that really here tonight. When it comes to Ohotyuk, I would say he had a bit of a struggling start to this game. One of the few Sharks players in those first few minutes who I don't think was amazing, but he definitely picked it up as the game went on and ended up being half decent for the San Jose Sharks on the night, especially with his partner struggling otherwise. And then finally we have the goaltender for the Sharks, Mackenzie Blackwood, who gets the start and gets the victory here, which was definitely nice for him. Doesn't necessarily get the goal support that the Sharks had previously had on the road trip, but does a fantastic job limiting the Jets to just one goal in this one. The Dillon one was one he probably could have had. It kind of deflects off of his glove, if I'm not mistaken, and then goes into the net. So technically this could have been a shutout, but I mean, there were multiple other chances in this game that the Jets absolutely could have scored on that Mackenzie Blackwood makes an amazing save on. So there's really no arguing in favor of that one. Blackwood definitely had a very good outing, which is nice to see because it complements Capo Kakinen, who has also been pretty good as of late. But that will do it for this review. The Sharks will be back in action on Friday, where they will take on the Arizona Coyotes. And the Sharks, while you can't really say they've been rolling because there have been a few losses interspersed here or there, they're definitely playing a lot better as of late. They're giving us some really fun games. We haven't had like a pretty disappointing one since the Boston Bruins shutout loss from a couple of weeks ago, and so you gotta enjoy it while it lasts. Class dismissed.